Super. Thank you very much, Kai. It's a great pleasure. As Paul knows, I've been unfortunately working on these standards for 20 years, and people ask me, it's like, what do you think about this? And I'm going, look, I just want it to be done. Okay? I want us to get there, and I'm really excited about the fact that I think we are there, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today here. And yes, I've been working on those things, and I wear 7 different hats. I actually put down my hat over there because I don't want to. Yeah, there's too much confusion. But I will point out, as I talk here today, that I think I work at both ends of the spectrum. At the bare metal end of it, when I'm talking about decentralized identifiers, I'm the co-editor of that spec. It's at the very bottom of the stack I'm going to talk about. And then I'm the chair at the Sovereign Foundation of the Trust Firm Working Group, which is the squishiest legal stuff at the other end of the spectrum. So we're going to cover the whole thing. The point I'm going to be driving at today here is decentralized identity standards in this hot new space that's being completely disrupted. I love, after showing this cartoon, to go, how many blockchain consultants in the room? See how many will self-identify? Yeah, anyway. My point is, blockchain and what's happening there really is, it has changed the game in many ways, and that's what I'm going to try and cover here today. Now, the biggest place where it's changed the game, you've probably all seen this. You may not know that this is the most reprinted New Yorker cartoon of all time, by about a third. When we licensed it when the Sovereign Foundation licensed it for the start of the Sovereign White Paper, and the New Yorker said, someone else wants to use it. It's like a third more reprints than any other New Yorker cartoon. That's a good indication just how deep the problem is. If you're a real insider, you would recognize that the logo of the Internet Identity Workshop is based on that, is a play on that. To give you a sense, that conference has gone on. The next one in October is number 27. Happens every 6 months. So that's a lot of history of that. Now, there's another fascinating thing about that ties us together, which is that conference grew out of something called Chaotic Commons. And Chaotic Commons came from this gentleman, and if you read closely there, you'll recognize, oh, that's the guy that started that. And all these analogies we have used to what kind of infrastructure we're creating with self-sovereign identity, and it is. You could say it's a lot like the internet, or you could say it's a lot like something like these. And we'll explain here why. So the guy behind that, D. Hawk, is 90 years old, and I read that book like 15 years ago when I first started working on this stuff. 2 weeks ago, I had the chance, was invited by the chairman of City Ledger to go visit D, because he lives in Olympia, Washington. I live in Seattle. And at 90 years old, he is still as sharp as a tack. He is just amazing. And it turns out that one of the things he's most excited about on the whole planet, what's happening out there, because since he left Visa, he's really been these ideas, chaotic organizations, chaos and order, what we would call decentralization, is his passion. So when I wanted one good picture for the slide deck, and I found that picture, I said, that's great, I wonder where it came from. And I clicked the link. Read that. So here it is, the founder of Visa turning around and telling us that Bitcoin, decentralized government, it is a little interesting, he says. One of the best examples of a decentralized peer-to-peer organization can solve problems that these data organizations cannot. Well, if you're familiar with Bitcoin, there isn't an organization. He was close, which represents one of the reasons after spending a day and a half with John Ainsworth and myself, he said, oh, you're the organization. And then everybody was talking about Sovereign Foundation, what we're trying to build there. But in any case, this is how, where he thinks the world is going. And it really highlights why what we're doing here with self-sovereign identity is not, it's not like it was, we're at a sea change, not just in technology, but in the evolution of standards. And in thinking about this and trying to say, so why is this different? How is it going to support what MyData is doing? There are 2 new factors. One of them is, of course, decentralization. All those other, standards bodies and efforts are basically very centralized. And now we're talking about governance for decentralized networks because that's how we're actually going to solve the problem in a way that everyone can agree. And the second part is, okay, so that means a major part of the problem is governance. It's not just technology. So I'm going to try to quickly cover here, and again, I'm not going to go deep into any of the specific standards. Very happy to dive deep and talk about decentralized identifiers with you for hours. But just give you a big picture. What are the technical standards and what are the governance things that are emerging? So the first point, we had in our prep call, we talked about this. The decentralized standards, I mean, how many folks turn around and go, well, how many standards was Bitcoin based on? Right? Ethereum. They are now developing standards within their communities, but they're not going to the Azure standards bodies, the official standards bodies that Colin was talking about. So there is going to be this tension between the two. Now, as Peli over there, we've been working together, and I'm first going to cover. There are some official Azure standards emerging, and I'm going to quickly explain what are they and why, where they fit into the stack. And to do that, the easiest way is to understand what is the big breakthrough of self-sovereign identity. What characterizes this space? We started out with centralized identity. We all know what this looks like, and the reason you're a little dot and circle on that is because you don't exist on the internet or on a network without an account on some system. Okay, that's the way it's worked for a long time. But just to get to do that safely on the internet actually involved. Quick here. Oh, something happened there. It's probably a gating, a timing thing.
That was the one quick wonder.
We're up until I click.
I think works quite okay.
I think you have to click that button was quite hard.
No, it lost the connection.
There we go. Okay. So, I was right there. I'm about to say, just to do that involved 7 years worth of work to develop standardized encryption for web connections. Okay. That's a lot of work. And if you talk to someone like Christopher Allen, who was involved with those, I mean, a lot of gray hair around that. So that's just to get to that step. Now, if we want to solve the problem of having to have a separate identity every place, that's, of course, what's behind the development of federated identity and inserting an identity provider in the middle, and really, cutting out a lot of pain in a lot of ways. And that's actually involved 3 generations of federation standards, 15 years worth of work. And between Colin and I, you can see the color of our hair or where it's going. That's what's been behind all that. So why, after all this work, are we at a watershed? Well, it's because with all the problems it solves, there's still limitations to federated identity that blockchain finally lets us get over. And what I'm going to quickly explain is why. Why is this a breakthrough? First point is you get back actual, just like the internet, peer-to-peer relationships. And I love seeing all the smartphones, but I want to tell you, I can get everyone a copy of these presentations, so don't worry about it if you want to have it all. And most of this is in a webinar. SSI Meetup has all of these. It has both the slides and a webinar. I think with peer-to-peer is much more reliable. Yeah, exactly, yes. And I mean, one of the things I can point out right away is as soon as you are dealing peer-to-peer with someone else, suddenly you don't call an account anymore, right? If I handed Kai a business card and said, Kai, thanks for forming an account with me, right? It's just not what it's about. It is about a connection you have with another peer. Now, why suddenly can we go to this model? Well, there's one. The reason that blockchain makes this possible is we can quickly say what makes this model work is that you have a digital wallet, okay? And yes, you can think phone. It's the easiest way to think about how we might carry it portably, but it's actually any device you have, right? It's just like all the other apps that you're using. Whatever device you have, what makes it like a wallet, and that's when I get on my other prop, is like all of SSI can be explained right here, okay? This, if you look at it closely, think about it for a minute, is a decentralized identity system. There is no one authority for what credentials, who can issue credentials, which ones I put in my wallet, or where I can go take them. It's all based on different trust systems and networks that decide on the credentials they use. Who issues them, who holds them, and where they're accepted. Okay? So all we're doing is we're basically taking that and putting it on the phone, and I can't pick that up because I don't have enough hands. So when we want to move credentials online, and you want to say, how do I get them in that wallet? Well, you can issue your own credentials. I put a business card in that wallet, hand it to you, and it's got a certain amount of credibility, but it's not going to get me on a plane. Okay? So where do you get a credential? You go to some peer who's going to issue it to you, and then when you want to go and prove your identity someplace, you're going to present a credential, show a credential to someone else, in and out of that wallet. This is self-sovereign identity. This is the whole architecture of the whole thing. And it requires 4 fundamental standards to make. Oh, I forgot to make one point. Why are those credentials accepted? Why can this be trusted? Because the digital signatures on those credentials are going to use public keys on a blockchain that all parties can run. That's the problem that blockchain solves. And notice, I didn't say it has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. Okay? It has to do all about using the cryptographic strength of this decentralized ledgers to provide public key discovery and verification around the world. Okay? It is ironic that it's like, for blockchain enthusiasts, it's like, well, that's just, of course. Well, it actually solves a huge problem in identity. So the 4 standards that are emerging in order to do this, the first one is decentralized identifiers, which is essentially an address for a public key on a blockchain. It doesn't have to be a public blockchain. It actually works on any blockchain. Any modern blockchain can support it. But if you can provide an address to someone that they can go and look up the public key on the blockchain, and you can rotate the keys over time so they can always look up the one at a certain point in time, and you can do it in a decentralized manner, so there's no such single authority you're relying on. And if it's cryptographically strong enough that you can rely on it, you've solved a huge problem. You've solved the core problem. This is why I'm saying it's the bare metal bottom line problem. The second thing you need to be able to do, I love it. Sometimes it's wrapped, sometimes it doesn't. DKMS stands for Decentralized Key Management System. You need the wallets where you're storing those keys and those credentials to be interoperable, right? If I had a proprietary wallet, for instance, only from Washington State in the US, it would be pretty limiting in terms of credentials, right? Same thing. If that's going to be how you're going to manage your identity on the internet for your entire life and your kids' lives and your digital estate, it can't be proprietary. It's got to be interoperable how you're going to do that, okay? The third thing we need is, okay, once we have that, how do we actually authenticate to each other over those connections? We're familiar, this whole progress, OpenID and OAuth, FIDO now is actually, the FIDO Alliance does that with peer-to-peer, with PKI today. If you're doing FIDO authentication, you're actually generating key pairs for every single connection you have. It's very privacy preserving, a lot of fantastic things we use. All this does is take the next step. Say for every one of those key pairs, you can have a DID, it standardizes rotation, standardizes portability, standardizes a lot of things. And the last thing is probably obvious from all this, you got to standardize the credentials. Otherwise, it's not going to be interoperable, right? And it's not, to use this analogy, they got to be a certain size. They got to be readable, right, to humans. Well, it's not, in many ways, that much more complex. That's what I'm going to quickly do now is just say for those 4, these are all at different stages of the evolution of du jour. I'll just name them out. PID is currently at W3C and what's called the Credentials Community Group. It's not an official working group, but they want to create one and go through the whole politics of doing that. It takes like 6 months, and but it's underway. It's still, as a Credentials Community Group standard, it's fairly mature, and that's what's being implemented right now. DKMS is, the earlier work was done actually under a contract with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It's planned to go to OASIS probably later this year or early next year. And why Oasis? They happen to be, it's where the came in. A lot of PKI standards are at Oasis. Ditto off, there's already a working group with the Decentralized Identity Foundation. It's the kind of thing that might end up at IETF. We don't know for certain. It is very closely related to FIDO, to web authentication. It's currently W3C. So we'll have questions about that. Marcus wrote a huge report on DITOff. Actually, it was funded by government of British Columbia, right? Yeah, very interested in that. And lastly, verifiable credentials. That's actually the most mature. It is a working group at W3C. It's about 2/3 of the way through its life cycle now. So that should be, an official W3C standard by mid next year, I think is the plan. Okay? So here's the de jure standards. These are the things that actually fit into the world that Colin has been talking about. Now, let me talk about the 5th standard that I don't think is going to be a de jure standard anytime soon. And I'm looking at Pele because this is one of the areas where all of us working on in this area, I want to come back. Okay. So that's the core of SSI architecture. And if you use the term, which Sovereign does, of agents on either side of that, then the core of interoperability, what all those other 4 standards ultimately are going to support, is how agents talk to each other. We call this the SSI protocol, even though it frankly goes far beyond self-sovereign identity. But that's where it starts out, because agents can talk to each other and understand each other about anything. This could take you over into consent, okay? Workflow, supply chain, all kinds of things can be built on this agent-agent architecture, okay? All of this infrastructure we're talking about, what we're talking about is the equivalent of things like TCP/IP connections at a much higher level, a level that can incorporate human trust, legal requirements, business rules, right? All these things in this stack. So, bottom line on this, there's no way this is, W3C already put this out of scope for the original verifiable claims working group. This is going to evolve so fast, it's going to be much more like, in my opinion, Bitcoin or Ethereum than it is. Eventually, it'll get caught up. So this is the premise I put in front of you. How is it evolving? What is happening right now? Well, I can speak to the fact that with Sovereign, all of the open source code is at the Linux Foundation, part of the Hyperledger project there. Specifically, it is the Hyperledger Indie project. That's where all the development that's going on around the sovereign ledger, but also sovereign agents. In fact, we don't even call them sovereign agents; they're just agents. And that work is going on. It's got a close parallel to the Decentralized Identity Foundation, where they call it hubs. So that's why when Kalia presented yesterday, she called them hub agents or agent hubs or something like that. And then, of course, that is what a community like Sovereign. It's all open. That's how we're driving that. So anyone here who's interested in the evolution of agent-agent protocol, talk to us. Talk to Pele and Newport and what they're doing. It's Ethereum-based, but we all need our agents to talk to each other, right? That's going to be the essence of that. Okay, the last point, just to make sure we're on time here, okay? Yeah. Is so now I'm going to talk about the squishy stuff, the stuff that isn't just technical or de jure standards, and that's the role of trust frameworks. You've heard it several times. I love the analogy of the BLT sandwich. Business, legal, and technical policies. If you've heard Elizabeth Reneris talk about this sometimes, she says, yeah, out there on the internet today, they left out the lettuce. Right? As a lawyer looking at this, she says, yeah, we have technical policies, we've got, businesses out there, but we don't have incorporated the law. Well, in many ways, GDPR is forcing that. There are other, it's not the only jurisdiction or only legislation that's doing that. But we're not going to have a trust layer for the internet that isn't tied into the legal mechanisms that we've developed over many centuries. So, the essence of trust frameworks has been around for a while. In fact, the analogy that we used when we first started Open Identity Exchange, about 10 years ago, the analogy we used, surprise, surprise, Visa, right? If you think about it, if I get out this wallet and I pull out a credential that I've got in there and it lets me do payment everywhere, if you took away the trust framework behind that, that credential would do nothing, right? What makes Visa Visa is not the technology. It is the operational rules, the agreements between all the members of the Visa network. That's the trust framework. So the reason this is so relevant as we move into SSI is as soon as you go over the digital credentials, every credential that's used beyond the scope of the single issuer, right? If you move just from a username password to a credential log into a site, fantastic. You've actually limited username and password. You've made a step forward, but it's only that one site. As soon as you want to use it across multiple sites, you're going to need a trust framework. And this is why we believe where we're going is if that's the case, then we are headed to an explosion of trust frameworks. Because every credential going into your digital wallet that will have any broader scope than a single issuer is going to have a trust framework in it. And in fact, we are providing so much of the infrastructure now that all that trust framework has to focus on is what issuers, under what policies, are issuing what credentials to achieve their trust objectives. It's going to make things actually a lot simpler. This is really going to lubricate a lot of business, which is where you're going to get the investment, and then you're going to get the legal regulation coming in and saying, yeah, let's get behind this, all right? So the last thing I want to do is explain, this is why in Sovereign, we have a trust framework working group that's been part of it from the very start. As I said, I chair that. And I'm going to actually show you some slides that we used. We had a 2-day meeting, face-to-face meeting, 20 of us right before the MyData conference. I want to thank MyData for helping us organize that and bring everyone together here. And I'll present this so you can see how, again, how clearly the trust frameworks fit into this and how cleanly they solve this problem of establishing trust. So we call it the three layers of enablement that we're trying to build with Sovereign as a global public utility. The bottom layer is very specific. It's a ledger, okay? It's actually 4 ledgers, 3 of which exist today, and the 4th one which is coming, which is the payment ledger for the Sovereign token, okay? There is going to be a token built in the Sovereign. It is there to deal with, surprise, surprise, the economics, the sustainability of a global public utility. So that bottom layer is there for those diagrams just to solve that one problem. How can you have a trusted root for public keys that everyone can use? And how can we operate that like the internet or like the domain name service as a public utility? That layer, as I've been explaining, then supports the agent-to-agent layer and the connections that are created between agents. And it's important when you think about that term connection, you look at it in this context. We're not talking about a TCP/IP connection between 2 machines on the internet. Those connections are between people and organizations, between people and connected things. They are connections at the layers of your identity, okay? And they're all persistent, cryptographically verifiable connections. When I say persistent, I want to give you a picture, okay? You're all handing each other business cards, you know, at a conference like this. Imagine now you're going to take your phone and hit a button and there's a QR code and Kai's going to scan it, okay? That's how quickly we will have created one of those connections. Now this is the really, really important thing to understand about SSI. What we will have just done there is generated 2 decentralized identifiers that are unique to the 2 of us, together with the 2 key pairs that are unique to the 2 of us, together with 2 what we call agent endpoints that are unique to the 2 of us, that we control. There is no service provider in the middle of that relationship. There's no ISP, no telco, no government. That's our forever, unless one of the 2 of us says we don't want it anymore. We have never had anything like that on planet Earth, right? Now, if you want to talk about how is this supporting the MyData principles, this is where we're trying to go, right? This is the kind of infrastructure we're trying to create where we as individuals and organizations and the connected things we control can all have these relationships, okay? Now, what's amazing here is at these 2 layers, all we've really done is we've established cryptographic trust. We've provided a way that we can anchor public keys here, and then we can connect agents and have these connections any place on the internet. But all we've done is, okay, you can trust this, the cryptography, okay? When you form a TCP/IP connection between any two devices, you don't actually base any trust decisions, or maybe just a little bit on what did I connect to? What's that IP address, right? We try to associate trust with that, but it's extremely weak. The whole point of what we're building here with SSI is that all that does is set the foundation for how we actually establish human trust, right? Person to person, person to organization, even with your connected things. This is the trust triangle of verifiable credentials. Issuers issue credentials to holders who provide proofs to verifiers. And they have their own trust relationships. There will be, again, this is the domain of trust frameworks that establish human trust, and there will be thousands and tens of thousands and millions of those trust frameworks. Some will be more formal, some will be less formal, some will have certifications, some won't. We're talking a whole, new industry for this trust layer of the internet. But that's how we can establish trust that is decentralized, right? That empowers every person, but doesn't disempower organizations, empowers them as well, okay? All these things can work together, and that's why we're excited about getting over this. So another way to think about this is, what we're doing with the Sovereign Trust Firm, we're just trying to build this very thin Lego. I had two boys, okay, actually my older boy was in his last year of law school, has come to Helsinki to be part of this. And I tried to explain this to him, he's like, you sure, Dad, this really works this way? But anyway, very thin layer into which the domain-specific trust firm is plugged. And the last thing I'm going to tell you is it sounds like, oh, this is really cool, you guys have this all theoretically figured out. And that this is the future of the internet, is these domain-specific trust frameworks, but we're not making this up. I'm really happy to tell you that there is an entire industry, the credit unions of the world, that have formed a consortium called Steel Ledger. They just announced earlier this week they've raised $8.5 million from 32 credit unions in the US and in Canada, but it is an international one, okay? Represents 235 million people worldwide, and the first thing they're doing is they're creating a digital credential based on sovereign, based on these standards, to standardize how anyone can prove they're a credit union member, which is a KYC, know your customer, verified identity. It is the first credential. It could be like a driver's license for the internet, okay? And they're not waiting. We, some of us on the Trust Fund Working Group, Sovereign Foundation, are working with them right now. Right? I literally go from this workshop to ones they're lining up in the US and Canada over the next 2 months. They want to have 1 million of these in people's hands by the end of the first quarter next year. So that's currently the brand name. That might evolve, but it's happening, and that's why I'm excited. So that's all I have, and I hope that's been helpful.